All right, looks like we are live again. We're going to be looking at this 7 days to die WebSocket integration for Streamer.bot, although I'm not exactly sure how it ties into Streamer.bot at the moment. But if we go to the GitHub repository, we'll take a look. So it looks like this code doesn't actually work anymore with the 1.0 release. So I did update it. And I refactored the entire thing, and I believe made it a bit better. So we'll look at those changes and how to get started working with a 7 days mod, a DLL mod. All right, so if we come out here, I had forked this repo already. 7 days to die WebSocket mod. It's linked here. If we look at the issues, we can't load the mod on version 1. There is breaking change. And then I also updated the mod. It doesn't have a license, so I did contribute all this back as pull requests. And this is kind of what we'll be looking at. I'm going to redo the walkthrough of refactoring this, and then we'll look at how it all comes together. All right, so I forked it, made all my changes here, and then contributed them back. All right, so how do we get started? So I had cloned the repository, and I've downloaded it and connected with my Visual Studio. Visual Studio community is free, so you can definitely download and use that for free. Yes, I had to start. All right. So how do we get started? We download and clone the repo. Then we have to set up a few things on top of that. So when it downloads, you're going to get source with all this stuff, but you're going to need to copy some files into this local refs. And you can get these ones from your 7 days game library. And there's a PowerShell script in here that can copy these for you, or you can just go get them and copy them. WebSocket Sharp DLL, you're going to want to copy it from the download on the GitHub page. It'll be in a zip file. Go back here. If you download this release, unzip it, you'll have that WebSocket Sharp, or yeah, WebSocket Sharp DLL. And you'll want to put that in there as well. Now, previously, Zero Harmony DLL used to also be in the 7 days directory, but it's not there anymore. So what we're going to do is actually reference it from NuGet. So I copied all these files in, but it's still unhappy about Harmony. So what I'm going to do instead is go manage NuGet package, Harmony, and install. Apply. Now Harmony is here. Do a rebuild. I'm just going to close and reopen because I was switching branches. There we go. All right, so now that was all because of just stupid bin and OBJ. If you delete those and rebuild, now it's happy. Now we can see this is the breaking change for the mod. This chat message handler is now different. If we look at the signature that it wants, client info, chat type, int string list. What we have has this localized main bool. So if we come back down here, we delete this. Now it's fine. It'll bind. So that's how you fix this problem. That's how you get set up. So just to clarify, we brought down the repo, We copied those files from 7 days directory into our local refs. All right. Local refs. We pulled these out of 7 days directory. This was on the GitHub, right? Under releases. You download this, extract it, that DLL will be in there. And then Harmony is not in there, so we had to replace it with a NuGet package reference. All right, now that we're compiling, we could figure out that this signature had changed and we fixed it. So now the mod builds. So technically at this point, we could go forward, but we're going to actually look at the code and refactor it a bit and try and break down what is a mod and how is this working at all. All right, so first thing, this iMod API from 7 days gives us kind of the entry point for the mod. We have this init mod method. So if we go to the interface, init mod, it passes in a mod object, instance of the mod, returns void, no return. So this will be called when the mod is initialized. This only has one reference, so we can tell immediately that's not necessary. I think we can technically get this information off of this mod object, but we're not going to look at that right now. But this is a path to an XML file that's configuring the WebSocket settings. And we're reading it using XML Reader. Now, I prefer to do things this way with a var and then object initializer. And because these settings are only used once, just inline it in the method. Right? We're creating a reader for this path with these settings. There's no reason to keep that outside unless we needed those settings again for some reason. Especially when trying to just get things compiling, having the duplicate types is super frustrating because it can make your error list much more detailed. This is actually putting in strings to an object. So this is a string dictionary. We'll just fix that. That'll also help down here because now we don't have to try and toString this because it is already a string. All right, well, reader.read, we're reading this config file. If it's a start element, this is going to be the config element in our XML. If it's an empty element, we're returning. I think this is actually a bug. I don't think we want to return. We want to actually continue on to the next read. So we could either update this to be continue or make a slight adjustment. Now, the other thing, there's a lot of this kind of crap. And sorry, not trying to offend anyone, but I really hate seeing stuff like this, especially when the code is not necessarily that great. In flattening that onto one line is technically valid, but you're going to cause yourself a lot of headache by doing that. Like, space things out. We could do this. Or we could say, all right, just skip it if it's empty and read again for the next element. Either of those is fine, but I'm pretty confident returning is the wrong thing because you just aren't going to load the mod instead of using a default then. So we'll do it this way. Skip it if it's a start. We're reading the element's name. Reading again, see if it's an inner element, and if so, using that name instead. So it'll be config, and then port, and then auth inside. So the file should look like. Right. And we'll say like port 9001 and auth is like bear PC, right? So read It is a start element. It's not empty. Come again. Read. It is a start element. Use port as the name. And then we're read as string. Actually, we want to do something different here. If we look at this IntelliSense, however, we recommend that you use read element content as string method instead. Content as string. And normally we do all this async, but this doesn't look like it's async. All right, so we change that. And what that's going to do is read this 9001 as a string, put it in the dictionary, keyed by port. All right. And we're going to read again. Going to bring in auth. When we read, this time we're going to have auth as bearer ABC. And then it's going to exit. And again, and inlining this, like flattening that onto one line is just not helpful. Like, don't do that. So we've read the config file. Now we're just logging the output. So everything that we read, so it's going to show port, what port it was there, auth, what auth was there. This is saying by default, we're going to use port 9000 if nothing specified, but we can actually do better than this. We're going to say if data, try get value, because anyways, we're checking for the key, and if it's there, we're reading it. So may as well try get value. We're going to try and get the value for the port key. And we know it's a string in there, right? And then, so we're going to try and get that. If that's there, then, well, let's do it this way for now. If we got the port string successfully, then we're also going to try and parse it. And int.parse port string out of our port, right? So if both of them, right, if the port string, it has a value and it's parsable to an int, we're going to use it. But instead, I'm going to say if there's no port key or it's not parsable, then the port is 9000. Try parse, of course. Right? If the port is not set or it's not parsable, default to 9000, and we can write a log as well. So we'll say log.out, call it Websocket, and we'll say port not set or invalid using default port, and we'll include the port number. Well, yeah, let's do this. Default port number is 9000. Default port number. You could do it a number of ways, but however you want. Right? Or we could say, you know, default port here and then whatever else, what we read. So we'll say else. It was successful. We'll say log out. Port set to this. Perfect. Then same thing. So now we don't need this one. Kind of same thing for auth. If not data dot, because again, if we're trying to get the key and then we're immediately doing it, of course, we want to use try get value. Pick the same thing, authentication. So if auth is not specified, I don't know, auth is null. Or in this case, looks like empty string. All right. That's better. Okay, so this is going to get called when we start. It's going to pull open this config file. Using the data reader, it's going to read all the nodes into a dictionary, which even this, I would say, is unnecessary. We don't need to read it into a dictionary. We just need to get the elements that we need. So I would redo this, not do that, and just pick the things I need directly. All right, so now we patch everything. So I'm not even sure some of these patches are necessary. It seems like we should be able to just hook right onto the event handlers and just forward those events. So it seems like we shouldn't even need to use Harmony unless we really want to be doing something special. So for now, I'm just going to refactor what's here, but I'm going to write my own version of this socket server that does not do any Harmony patching. And then maybe a second one that does if there are things that are actually like particularly necessary. Anyway, so when we look at the patching, what is that going to do? So we're initializing a Harmony and patching everything that's set up using annotations, and then looking at, so we're outputting what we patch. So this is only ever called once, and both of these are static, so this should be a static class. There's nothing not static about this. So that's one thing. This is really probably not good. Having this public static settable thing is generally a bad idea. So there's probably a better way to handle that, but I'm not going to get into that for now. This is only called in one spot, so realistically, just inlining it to me makes a lot more sense. This is part of initializing the mod, right? Like, we read the configuration. And realistically, I guess we read the configuration, and now we're going to start this. And then we're going to patch. Well, I guess we would patch first, right? Because if this, nope, we're going to start connection. Because if this started sending events before it was even started, that would be silly. So we're going to start the WebSocket server, and then we're going to patch. And we'll look at that in a second. But this all stays the same. All right, this runtime patch is no longer being referenced. Now, this headshot thing is being set in def, set dead, and it's being used. No, it's being set here. It's being set in damage entity local, and it's being used here. So when the damage is dealt, it's more or less tacking it onto a static, so that if a death follows, we can tell that that death was due to a headshot. It seems. I feel like there should probably be a way to determine it just from this, but we'll look at that further later. So let's try and get rid of that by just moving this to where it's being consumed. We'll add it here. And then where it's being set, we'll move it to, what was it called? Patch entity death. So now this type can be removed altogether. Reflection utilities, again, the code is not good enough to be doing stuff like this. It's only going to make a headache for you and make it harder. Again, this is a static class, public static class. If you only want it internal, you can do that too, but it's a static class. All right, get the type. Now, when I updated this to .NET 9, we turn on type annotations, and you know, there's definitely needs to be more null checking and stuff in here, but let's just leave it how it is for the moment. And effectively, if we have an info is not null call this, we can do this instead. Okay. And then info itself. So we can just more or less inline all of this. Right. And I like dot aligned. So we have get type, get field, coalesced to get the value. And it doesn't need to be in here, so we'll just move it out. All right, so now this is in its own file, and it's just simple. Now this can be an extension method as well. So on object, we can just say object.getValue, pass in the string for the field that we want, and then we'll do this. Or we can still call it through reflection utilities.getValue. All right, well, to stream, leave some comments. We're just going over some C#, updating this WebSockets mod for 7 days to die. All right, that got rid of that one. So runtime patch now just looks like this. All right. If we look at start connection, this is doing something with a thread starting this back here. I don't think this is actually doing what the author believes it's doing, but we do want it to be a background thread. If this is not set, this is going to try and keep the game open if this is still running, which is not what we want. So if the game crashes or closes for whatever reason, we want this thread to exit. We should also be tracking this thread and aborting it on stop or reusing it instead of just starting it and not doing anything with it. But we'll start with this. So we'll just background it. This one, again, it's a little simpler. This one, we want to be able to actually send the object out because we have a lot of JSON serializing sprinkled in everywhere. So we'll do object argument, I guess. Be consistent, and then we'll call send with the event name, and then JSON convert. Now it's just localized instead of having to have a JSON convert in all these 10 spots. Calling that one. This one I think can just be, it doesn't need to be split, but for logging, I am going to split it. And then again, don't do this. Do separate logging here so we can tell which of these is failing more easily. I'm not sure that we actually have to check this one, but again, I'm just trying to be minimally destructive to this code. What up, Homicidal? We're doing C# stuff today, so may or may not be interesting to you. So what this is doing is if we have this message, we're just sending it to anyone who's connected to the client. So when we look at the WebSockets, it's just sending it to everyone that is listening for events. All right. Again, I don't know why we do this. And now we don't need this JSON convert everywhere. And we can inline this. Just keep it a little more tidy. Yeah, I don't like any of that. I don't like any of it. And we can get rid of this, simplify it. And when we refactor this to remove Newtonsoft, it'll be easier because we'll only have to change it in one spot. Oh, for work, for fun work, right? Refactoring this 7 days WebSocket integration. I want to redo the my overall goal is to redo the Twitch integration to be able to work on YouTube also. And to do that, I have to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. And not everyone has as much experience writing C#, it seems. So we're doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'm just cleaning up the existing mod and showing some of the refactoring. And this could be public, but we can seal this and make these read-only. And we'll really probably make these records or anonymous types even in here instead of doing that. And then player is duplicated, and it's exactly the same. Yeah, thanks, brother. So we're going to actually pull that out because there's no reason for it to be the same and in two places. We'll move that to player. Perfect. Okay, and there is another one, so it should probably not build. What? All right, well, it might be hiding or something. Okay, we'll look at that in a second. Private, let's make these read-only. Let's the compiler make more assumptions on the code. If we tell it these are read-only fields and the class is sealed. And we don't like any of this. Perfect. All right, so far, just minor cleanup refactorings as we're going through here. Beautiful. Thing looks pretty good. All right, now let's look at the actual patches. Runtime patch. All right, here's that other player class that's identically the same. Just be hiding the other one. All right, and same, we can say, I mean, these can be public or private, doesn't really matter, but you should specify it. And these are read-only fields. And let's make them such. These are all read-only as well. Hey, welcome to stream. We're just cleaning up some of this 7 days to die WebSockets extension code. and getting it to work with the latest 1.0 release. And making it more efficient. There's some little bit of weird stuff going on, and we're gonna re-implement it using our own or a different WebSocket server because this one is crazy. Apparently it's 26 degrees. That's true. There is snow on the ground. Now, these ones, I don't know if they need to be sealed or not. Actually, this is static, so even better. So this is a static class. It's all static. I don't know if this matters if it's public or not, but I mean, clearly it doesn't, but again, we just want to specify these things. But and it unshades it. So in this case, these are kind of backwards, right? So if we have bailouts, we really want to bail as soon as possible. So this one is saying use the instance to traverse and find this field and get its value. Well, if the instance is a certain type, irrespective of the outcome of this traversal, we're going to return out of this method. So executing this method is completely unnecessary if this is true. So in fact, we're going to reverse that. Okay, this goes first, and why we keep doing this, I don't know. Is it going to be a lot? Are you expecting a big whammy or just a little bit? We're going to bail out if instance is that. Then otherwise, we're going to actually do the traversal. And then if that traversal is null, then we're going to bail. Now we have an entity who killed me, and we know the object is not null, and a cast is never going to result in a null. So this isn't really a thing. So the next thing we're doing is looking to see if this same object, after casting to this for some reason, is an entity player. So in fact, what we're going to do is take the object and try and make it this instead. And then we're going to name it with the, because here you're checking the type and then using an as instead of even just direct casting. So this is all kind of squirrely. This is how you should do it. So with the pattern matching, if this object is this type, this new variable will be created of this type called player, just like down here, what we wanted. And we're going straight from the object because all this kind of in-between stuff is, it can't happen anyway. None of that is relevant. They say it'll be, yeah, who knows, right? How much is a lot? Like, you gonna get feet? Now, when we look at this one, we know that it's not an entity player, or it is an entity player, I mean. And now, we're getting its debug name. So this is going to be like Zombie Arlene or, you know, Feral Zombie Arlene, whatever it is, right? So that's going to be the debugger name. We're going to use that to determine, is it an animal or a zombie? So it'll be like animal chicken, zombie mo, right? So we can tell from that name what it's actually going to be. Now, in this case, we're double doing the lower, right? And we're never using the value anywhere else. So realistically, we should have it one time here, because we're always doing it, right? So we don't need it here. Welcome! The silent protagonist. What are we building? Well, I'm updating the 7 Days to Die WebSocket mod, and I guess it goes with Streamer.bot as well. I don't really understand how it's connected to Streamer.bot just yet, but effectively adding a mod to 7 Days to Die that will stream out events. Yeah, I think that thing is maybe louder than my mic even. Let me turn it down. Wide, in case anyone joins us. But it doesn't work with the 1.0 release, so I fixed that, and then there was a lot of other problems. So we're just going through refactoring the code, updating it, and then I'll show an update to .NET Standard as well. 10 inches to a couple feet. Holy moly. Yeah, that is definitely a lot of snow. We just got a dusting on the ground right now. Let's see. I thought you were by Texas. You're getting 10 feet of snow in Texas? Damn. um, my overall goal in doing this, so I did part one as a point system for OBS, not OBS, for Streamer.bot that works with YouTube and Twitch. So custom point system that just works with both of those. This one, this WebSocket integration will allow me to hopefully rebuild the Twitch integration to work with both YouTube and Twitch. Now, I'm not going to worry about the overlay and stuff. I just care about the chat commands. So I want to have it so that YouTube can actually participate. So using the custom point system, we'll have our own version of PPs. People can use the same redeems. We can trigger all the same kind of stuff using that, and then just have Streamer.bot kind of connect it together. So that's my goal of this. I think it'll be maybe like 4-part series or something. Hopefully not more than that. But the first thing is to get this WebSocket working. So this is upgrading WebSockets, and then I'm going to rewrite this using a different socket server because this one's kind of old and crappy. I'm actually going to turn off my Streamer.bot, I think. This is the educational stream. All right. So in here, we have, like I said, the animal or zombie name that's going to tell us what kind of kill it was. And then we're going to trigger a certain type of socket event based off of that. So we're always going to send a player killed something. And was it an animal? Was it a zombie? What weapon were they using? And did they use a headshot to kill them? And then if it's a animal that's not a zombie animal, then we'll send a player killed animal. Otherwise, we'll send a player killed a zombie event. So these are kind of the custom events that we're going to be sending from the socket server. When we look at this, regex, at a minimum, regex like this should be compiled and reused. So this is going to recreate this regex inline over and over again, and we definitely do not want that. So what instead we can do, and this is the easiest way to do this, is say, okay, here's an animal regex replacement. I'll just call it that. Animal regex. And this is a new regex. And the pattern, animal. And the options, now we already have a lower here, and we have a lower, so we don't need the ignore case. This is just going to be extra work. But what we do want is compiled. So this is going to compile one time, the first time that it runs, and then it's going to keep using it. And then we're going to do this again for the zombie. Right? That lets us not do that, right? So now I can say this equals, and again, with this flat, like, if stuff is, again, only going to make your life more difficult. Don't do this. If this code was flawless, then yeah, you can do that. But this code is not flawless. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it will be really cool when it's done, and I should be the only one that has it, and I'm going to be... Because most of my users are on YouTube anyway, so... It's like, to me, it's really frustrating that they can only do it on Twitch, and I'm not a Twitch partner, so I can't use the bits and stuff anyways. So I'm just like, I just want to have fun with my audience. All right. So now we can say regex replace animal. No, we don't want that. We want animal regex dot replace ent, right, with empty. Right, and this is the compiled one, so it's not going to keep doing that. This is, I mean, you know, 7 days isn't exactly the most efficient game in the world, so anything we can do to optimize our code and make it. Streamer.bot says it had both integrations. So they have this like WebSocket integration, but this one doesn't work with the latest game version. So I'm updating that. Unless you see a different one, because the one I'm looking at is this one. This one doesn't work anymore. Unless you're saying they have another 7 days integration in here. But yeah, I mean, if this already exists, I definitely would love to use it. But this is so far the best I find. This looks like I'm gonna have to do it myself, and I don't think it'll be too complicated once I get it working. But anyway, this is how you do the replacement to get rid of the word animal, so we can tell what animal it was. Same for zombie, we can tell which zombie it was. We don't need this anymore, and we can say. Well, I guess depends how we want to do that, but I guess it's just speed. Let's do it this way. So if it contains animal, set it to true and do the replacement. If it contains zombie, set it to true and do the replacement. All right. Weapon type only used right there. We can just inline it, and same for headshot. Yeah, I gotta see how the WebSocket thing in Streamer.bot actually ties into it, because from this page, I don't really see what this has to do with Streamer.bot just yet. This is all just like making 7 days thing. Oh, shit, I didn't even see that. All right, we'll look at that in a minute. All right, so we have the zombie replaced, so now we know which zombie it is. We know if it's an animal. We inline those, so we don't need these. We don't need the namespace here. Same namespace. And then we don't need the serialize anymore because we have the overload that takes an object. All of this just simplifying, simplifying, simplifying. Perfect. And this can be simplified as well. If zombie. This is if animal and not zombie, and then if zombie. So if zombie. Nope, he never popped in. I'm not sure what he's doing. I think he went back to work today though. Or yesterday. So these two if statements can be more, well, actually better expressed like this, because it is an if and an else. So we don't need to double check that. So that's the refactoring of that one. So again, what is this doing? If something is dead and it's the player, well, we're not doing anything here. And in fact, probably what we want to do is send a player died event. I don't know why it doesn't do that. If it's not the player, figure out who, and then if it's an animal, which animal. If it's a zombie, which zombie. Always say the player killed something. The entity type, is it an animal, is it a zombie? What did they kill it with, and was it a headshot? If they killed a zombie, send a player killed zombie, and if they killed an animal, send the player killed an animal. All right, and then we're going to say it succeeded, so return true. All right. Well, that's that one. If we look at entity alive, damage entity local. So this is someone took damage. And then we're looking at what body part was hit. If it was a head, we're going to say it's a headshot. So we're going to say this is also a static class. And just to get the shade off, let's say that's static and public. This is also a static class. And to get the shade off. All right. Again, this is really sketch. I would definitely look at alternative here. Setting static public properties is generally not the right thing to do. So there's probably a better way to compute that. When we look at this, there's a few funny things in this method, to be honest. So we're getting the package name. Well, again, so we're getting the package name from this instance package ID, and we're checking to see, is it this? Why we do this, I don't know. Then, if it is this name, then cast it. So I'm pretty sure this should just be a typecasting on the instance. Not sure. But anyway, so if it is this type, cast it. And then now we're using these reflection utilities over this type. But the problem is they're already available anyway. So we can say damage entity damage. Can't spell damage. Entity ID, right? That's what this is doing through reflection. I'm not sure why we're doing that. We'll just say, okay, that's the entity ID. We don't need to do the reflection. Then if the entity is null or it's not a player, return again. Don't know why we're doing this. All right, welcome to the stream. Love to chat with you while we're going through this refactoring. Look up the entity in the world by its ID. If we can't or it's not the player, return. Otherwise, get the damage type. Now, again, we can do the same thing. Damage type is available. And it is already the same type that we're looking for. So we don't need to do reflection there. And then same for strength. So when we do this, we can say damage strength. We don't have to do reflection. Don't need the namespace, and we don't need to serialize here because we have the other overload. So that big, crazy method turned into this, right? Let's back that up. Like, how crazy is this? This all just smashed together crazy. Oh, going the wrong way. I'm gonna go forwards. And look how elegant, right? And this is so important, right? We need our code to be efficient. And like I said, 7 days already is kind of questionable. So we don't want to be doing a whole bunch of extra reflection for no reason, right? We already have things how we need them. And I'm pretty sure this is just needs to be a type check, but I don't want to deal with that right now. All right, so here, if not entity player, and we don't need this. Perfect. Now this is casting, so we can use the pattern matching here and just like that. And we don't need that line. Perfect. All right, how are we doing? Still build? Still builds. All right, so we cleaned up all the patches. Nice and beautiful and elegant now. We don't need these. everything is read-only, sealed, properly marked, static. Our regex are compiled. This is still the one kind of wonky thing. But these are all straightened out to fast path and minimal check, so everything is as optimal as possible in all these flows. Now, when we look at the connections, we start with HTTP connection. This takes a port and an auth. So this is what we were reading in from that config file, right? Which port are we running the server on, and what authentication are we using? Now, we're allowed to not use authentication, so this is fine. But if we do pass in authentication, we're going to hash it and keep track of that. Otherwise, we're going to set the server, and then when it receives a GET request or a POST request, we're going to run these event handlers. Now this one is static, right? Need to mark it as static. Then perfect. And then when it's a helper like this, normally I like to put it at the bottom. That's just a preference thing for me. All right, now what do we have? Is authenticated. We're going to look at the request. If our authentication is not empty, meaning we have a saved authentication, we're going to check to see if any of the headers are specifying an auth. If not, then it's not authenticated. So we're saying we have captured auth that needs to be sent, but it is not being sent in the headers. So this is false. So this same check is here, which is weird, but we'll deal with that in a second. Otherwise, we're going to say go into the headers and grab this. So just like before, it's like, you know, usually this is a try get pattern, but okay, let's just keep going. If that header starts with bearer, then we're going to chop off the bearer piece of it, take the rest, hash it, and see if it matches with our auth. So in our config file, the auth that it's expecting is without this piece. It's just the token. It's not the bearer part of it. We just want the token. Right? And then if those don't match, then it's not authenticated because we're not using the correct auth that we captured. So how do we write that a little more plainly? If we say, okay, if and in fact, there's no reason to keep checking that over and over again. So we could say private bool has auth and just set that here because these are read-only anyways. So either you have auth or you don't. You always did or you always didn't. Read-only. I could spell. Now we have auth. Else authentication is null and has auth false, just for clarity, and then that will help with the annotations as well, so it'll know that it was set. All right. So if not has auth, so if we don't have auth, just return true. Right? We don't have any auth, so sure, you're authenticated. Otherwise, we do have auth, and this is the importance of bail early, right? Check first on the easiest thing. I don't even have auth, so of course, I don't need to do anything else. Bail. This also keeps your code from getting indented too much, right? So we unrolled that check. This one bails out. Otherwise, we know we have it. Now we can check this one and get it at the same time. So we say, if not, request dot headers dot try. Oh wait. So this itself will return null if the key does not exist. So we don't even have to check it. You can just say var auth header. Right, so if we look at the docs, that one gets or sets the key. If found, otherwise null, right? A string that contains a comma separated list of values with the specified key. If found, otherwise null. So if that key does not exist, it's null. So if auth header is null, false. We didn't specify auth, but we have auth. Right? And now we don't have to pull it separately, so we already have it into a variable. And again, you see the code is becoming more vertically aligned instead of indented. So if the auth header starts with bearer, let's remove that piece. Right? And then if my stored authentication does not match the hashed auth header, then I'm not using the right auth. And then otherwise, true. And in fact, we should never compare strings like this. We'll say return string compare ordinal, because this is a hashing. It has to be exact. The case included. This is bytes, really. Equals auth authentication and the hash. And you should always specify string comparison this way. Right? That is how we tell if we're authenticated. I think this is static also, huh? No, it's not. My bad. My bad. Got greedy there. All right. I don't really like doing this way where the method is separate, especially if it's called only once. So I typically inline this. You can definitely keep it out if that's your preference, but there are benefits of inlining it compared to keeping it outside. Specifically, you can't make a typo, right? So if I had put on post here both times, that's valid, but not what I wanted. Right? So we'll just copy this up here. If the request is not authenticated, we're going to say set the response status code to unauthorized and exit. Otherwise, check the request raw URL. If it's empty or it doesn't start with API, so this is only responding to GET requests against a /API route, it's going to be a bad request. Then you could add custom paths here for different things. So you could say like API / player data, you know, question mark, player ID, like however you could map those out to each have their own endpoint. And then otherwise we're going to close the response. So this really doesn't do anything except tell you if you're authenticated or not, or that you called an API route, because none of these will return data. This is more of a stub than anything. And now we don't need this. That's the other reason why I like inlining it. Then you know that method literally had no purpose being out here other than to separate the code from where it's being called. And when you have it here, you got to wonder, like, is it being called in the right spot, or what is it even doing? All right, so here we'll say HTTP request event args e goes to that. Again, the request is not authenticated. Return unauthorized response. Check to see that we're posting to API endpoint. If so, chop that off. And then see, is it a command? So the only post that we're going to accept is API command. And then that post should have a body that's telling us what to send. So this is more or less sending into the console. What do you want? So in the post body would be the exact string that we're going to send to 7 days console to run some sort of command. Right. So what do we have here? If the request has a body, we're going to read it. So let's go ahead. I mean, technically we are closing these things, but I think the using is the better option here. So we'll do using. Well, let's just do it here. Using. That. And then the stream is the input stream. And the encoding is the encoding. That simplifies that a little bit. Now this will automatically close the input stream as well. There's also an overload that you can specify leave open true if you wanted to. But since that was closing anyways, we'll just close. Now we have command. Yeah, I turned it off. The sound stuff. We'll get back to the fun stuff soon. This is all the boring programming stuff. All right, if they sent a command, we're going to say, okay, run that command from the content body. So this one requires actually a body to have been sent. White space content. This is actually an error as well, and we don't even need to do the rest of it. This one we're reusing, and we want it to be same. May as well call it out as a variable. This command does not rely on any of that stuff. And we only are going to do that if this doesn't like throw an exception. There's no reason to start building the response out and then this fails or something. So if we've sent a command and content in the body to actually execute, we're going to send it to 7 days to run, and we'll jump and see what that looks like in a minute. And then we're going to encode the response. So we're going to do UTF-8, text plain, and then send that back out on the WebSockets. All right, and then this is no longer required. Now, when we run a command, effectively what we're doing is saying, okay, get this 7 days to die console singleton instance. And then that thing has an execute async method. And this takes the command string that we want to send to the console along with this console connection interface. And all this is like a logger. So when we look at this, it's just capturing like if when we execute something needs to be sent into the logs, they're going to just call this method, right? Now this, I don't know the concurrency really with 7 days, but whenever I see something like this and we don't know, is this going to be concurrently called from different, you know, like while it's loading, how many different things could possibly write to this? But I would update this to be concurrent queue instead, and then we can actually initialize it inline, so we don't even need the constructor. So we can just say new current queue, and I think we can we just do that? No. We don't need a constructor anymore. And then instead, we are going to enqueue. Instead of add, we're going to enqueue. And then, because we do need a list at some point, we're going to make that private and read only. And we'll add a public list, get lines, turn lines, to list. Now there should be an error. So when we run the command, what are we doing? We're getting the console. We're newing up one of these logger things. I'm going to do that because I like that better. And we're executing it, right? Now this execute async is void. So it pretty much like puts it in the queue to be executed. And now what this next code is doing is checking, has it actually run yet, or is it still pending? And we can definitely improve on this code. So what this is doing is saying, okay, from this type, get this field, and then eventually pull the value. Now, we have a reflection utility that knows how to do this off of this type already, so we can say, we can do this a little bit differently. Let me fix this real quick. This is now get lines instead, right? So that's error's gone. All right. This can be unwound a bit, and we have a try block. So whenever we have a try block, that just sets up a lot of overhead, and we really don't want to do it unless we have to. And this can be done without the try block. So if we look at what is the goal of this code, and then how can we rewrite it, be more efficient. On this 7 days to die console is a commands to execute async property, right? Like this is a member field that contains all the things that need to run still. So there's a bunch of command instances. So if we go to this definition, commands to execute async, there's a list of command instances that need to run still, right? And what is command instance? Is just the command in the logger, right? So command instance, the string, and that logging thing. So effectively, what we queued up here. So what are we doing? We're grabbing that field, and then we're saying, look at it, make sure that it's enumerable, which we know list is, and then loop through each thing in there, look at the command string, and if it's the same command that we sent, we're going to assume it's still running. Now, this technically has a problem where if you had multiple of the same command, it might think it's still running when it has already run. So you probably could technically also use the reference of this, like which one of these things has been sent. But at any rate, we're not worried about that. So at the end of the day, what we're doing is trying to get this list and see if there's a command in there that matches the one that we queued. And if there is, we're going to assume it's still running. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to sleep for 50 milliseconds and then check it again. I really don't feel like walking through that, so I'm going to just steal it from my other branch. Which file is this? HTTP connection. HTTP connection. So then this is what it looks like. So we get rid of the try. Patches. Or let me just place that up. Rebuild. All right, still builds. All right, so again, the goal of this is to get that field. We couldn't get it. I mean, that's really an error, right? So we couldn't look up that field. Assuming that we could look up that field, we are going to, in a loop, because we're always going to do it one time. So while loop, right? If you're always going to do it one time, you can generally unwind it to a do while, right? So we're going to do get the command q field value, right? So this is, could I find the reflection field, right? Does this object even have something called this? If it does, then pull the value. So now I'm getting the actual list, right? And if that list is null for some reason, it's null, and we're just going to send a warning, break out of the loop, and continue, right? If it's not an enumerable for some reason, which we know it is because it's a list, so unless the type changed, we're going to log a warning, break, and move on. Otherwise, we're going to actually look in that, so go through, iterate each of them, pull that command value just like before, and then see, are these the same? And if it is, we are still queued. But we can stop checking, right? If there was 500 things in this list, we don't need to check 500 of them. We only need to get to the point that we know. So the other code was checking all of them regardless. This one is saying, once you find a match, stop checking. And then if somewhere in that queue you did find a match, break. CSharp doesn't support like a break too, which would be nice if it did. Because then we could say break out of this loop also. Now, we're doing that here to avoid the sleep. So if the first time we came in, like by the time we queued it, and then by the time this reflection ran, and we checked the value, and it had already run, this sleep will never run. We can avoid sleeping altogether in that case. Otherwise, we'll sleep, check this again, and then break out. All right. So that's a HTTP connection. And then we already looked at this thing, which is pretty much just a logger. And all we did was make this a queue instead, and then this could be sealed as well. Sealing is, I guess, kind of optional, but there's really no reason to leave it unsealed at this point. We can do that here as well. When we look at the WebSocket thingy, this is kind of weird, honestly, but the way this is initialized in the API, right, we're saying create a new HTTP connection and add a socket server by the type. If we look at this guy, it's taking a specific type that we know is newable, like it has a constructor with no args, and then we're adding it to this path. So we're saying slash knows how to new up a WebSocket server. Now, that's going to happen at some point when that endpoint gets hit. It's going to run the constructor and then populate this static instance, which again is a little bit weird, but now we have access to send out to everyone who joined the session through this property. And then this needs to be resettable, so it can't be read-only, because if that, right now, the way this code is set up, we get a new HTTP server and it will get a new one of these. So each time it news this, we want that one to be in the singleton. So that's a WebSocket server. So that is effectively cleaning up all of these files. The other thing that I did was move these events to their own file in my GitHub, but this is effectively how I had refactored it to begin with and how I got to that endpoint. These are all the same changes that are in the refactor branch, along with some changes to the mod info and such. The other thing that needed to change to make this work with 7 days in the mod info you have to get rid of this. There's like a V2 API, and then you also need like a play name, I think. Once we have these changes, then it will load again. But all of this is on my GitHub. I also did a second refactoring here that moves it to net standard and .NET 9. The problem is only the .NET 4.8 output has the right DLLs. So what am I doing? Here, if we look at the pull requests, .NET 9, this is updating it to use like range syntax. The CSharp project file is greatly simplified to just be target these frameworks. It did enable nullables, so all the nullable annotations are there. Latest framework language features, so we're using range and for like substrings and such, and just a much simplified project structure. But only the output for the 4.8 gives all the DLLs, and you can just drop it in. So for 7 days, in your mods folder, you'll be able to drop all this stuff in there and it just sync up. So that's about it for this socket server. Yeah, I'm not sure. I did, like I said, I put those pull requests up. Hopefully they get approved or reviewed or figured out, but this is updating all the code to latest.net and getting it working. Now, next step is going to be actually hooking up the point system and this WebSocket server in Streamer.bot so that when a user on Twitch or YouTube types in one of these commands, it can execute against the custom point server. See if the user can actually do the redeem and then send that into 7 days to die to actually execute. In 7 days to die, if you do a spawn entity, you can specify an extra string that will go over top of that entity. So if you say like spawn a mo, and you can give it the Twitch or YouTube username of the user who spawned it, you can also put an icon over top, just like in the Twitch integration. You can put those blue skulls. All of that is possible. So it's just a matter of hooking it up. And I do plan on doing that over the next hopefully 1 or 2 series of tying this all together, and then we'll have cross-platform 7 days to die unified integration, and it'll be so cool. But yeah, I guess stay tuned for that, and we'll catch you all next time.